Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Coordinator Winsland, for your sobering briefing. I don't know how many people in this room have watched a child die of starvation. I have. It was nearly 3 decades ago, but it's the kind of memory that one doesn't forget. Her rib bones poking out from under her skin, bloated belly, gaunt eyes, and I remember her mother's eyes filled with despair. And I think about her as we have seen reports that no food assistance has reached Jabalia or Beit Lahia since early October. About the ribs and the bellies, the eyes of children in northern Gaza, and about their parents, themselves having gone days without food, desperate to save them. This unimaginable suffering was set in motion by Hamas on October 7th, and the United States has not been shy about criticizing this council's failure to condemn Hamas's atrocities and repeated violations of international law. Many in this council have not done as of yet. At the same time, the United States has made clear to Prime Minister Netanyahu that 1 year into this conflict, Israel must address the catastrophic humanitarian crisis in Gaza, that the United States rejects any Israeli efforts to starve Palestinians in Jabalia or anywhere else, and that Israel's words must be matched by action on the ground. Right now, that is not happening. This must change immediately. The U.S. has stated clearly that Israel must allow food, medicine, and other supplies into all of Gaza, especially the north, and especially as winter sets in, and protect the workers distributing it. In this regard, I reiterate our deep concerns about legislation adopted by the Knesset regarding UNRWA. There's no denying the fact some UNRWA personnel were involved in the October 7 attacks. This council heard directly from families of hostages taken into Gaza by UNRWA staff, as we just heard from the Israeli ambassador. UNRWA itself has confirmed that there were some Hamas members found among its personnel. In addition, though we acknowledge the steps UNRWA has taken to implement the reforms outlined in the Colonna report, we need this progress to accelerate. And we call on the Secretary General to create a mechanism to review and address allegations that UNRWA personnel have ties to Hamas and other terrorist groups. At the same time, we know that right now, there's no alternative to UNRWA when it comes to delivering food and other life-saving aid in Gaza. Therefore, we have concerns about this legislation being implemented. Instead of speaking at one another, Israel and the UN must speak to one another to address the fears that led to the Knesset's legislation and to ensure that UNRWA can fulfill its critical mandate, rebuild confidence in its mission, and the hundreds of staff who are not associated with Hamas. In addition, as President Biden has reiterated, Israel must conduct its operations in Gaza in a way that protects civilians and adheres to international law. Efforts by the Israeli government to facilitate humanitarian assistance is appreciated, but much more has to be done. We all know that Hamas uses schools, it uses hospitals, and ambulances to hide weapons and fighters. But harrowing reports of medical staff being arrested by Israeli forces at hospitals in northern Gaza are also deeply troubling. We urge Israel to publicly address these allegations immediately. And we reiterate there must be no forcible displacement, no reoccupation, and no territorial reduction of Gaza, period. Colleagues, in addition to sounding the alarm over the urgent humanitarian situation in Gaza, we must also not ignore the rising violence in the West Bank. Israeli authorities must intervene when extremist settlers launch attacks and hold perpetrators to account. The United States will continue to sanction actors that commit and enable violent activities or foment extreme instability and violence against civilians in the West Bank. What's more, the United States has been clear. The Israeli government's settlement program is inconsistent with international law and harmful to the prospect of a two-state solution. So too is undermining the West Bank's economy. We urge Israel to release withheld clearance revenues and extend waivers for Israeli banks, helping maintain correspondent banking relationships with the Palestinian equivalents, especially given assessments that these institutions can adequately prevent money laundering and financing of terrorism. Colleagues, I know it feels impossible with so much suffering now to think about the day after, but we must reject the false choice between alleviating pain today and preventing it tomorrow. The elimination of Sinwar, along with much of Hamas's senior leadership and terrorist infrastructure, presents an opportunity for the parties to re-engage and, most importantly, finalize a ceasefire deal with hostage release consistent with Resolution 2735, to begin taking steps to achieve a day after in Gaza without Hamas in power, terrorizing Israelis and Palestinians alike, and to work toward a political settlement that provides a better future for Israelis and Palestinians. Let me just say here, diplomacy does work, but it takes a lot of work to get there, and we have to continue to put our efforts behind the diplomatic efforts that are currently being pursued. We have the urgent responsibility to stop the suffering of Palestinian civilians and to secure the release of hostages, to alleviate their suffering and that of their families, to make the most of this moment and ensure the parties to the conflict do the same. Thank you, Mr. President.